If you are a self-help junkie, you have probably come across today's guest. Dr. David Burns is not just a psychiatrist. He's a disruptor, and he's a creative voice in the field of mental health. Not only did he help bring cognitive behavioral therapy to the masses, but he's helped millions of people worldwide with depression and anxiety through his books, Feeling Good and Feeling Great.
And Beck had some techniques, but they were kind of dry and a little on the boring side. And so I started developing more powerful techniques, more like what I'd seen in psychodrama, and over the years kind of first I wrote Feeling Good, which was classical cognitive therapy, and then it's now morphed into something we call TEAM CBT, which is like cognitive therapy on steroids.
Now Dr. Burns has taken it a step further with his Feeling Great app, which is driven by AI. Imagine having a Dr. Burns in your pocket to help you with depression, anxiety, or whatever symptoms you're experiencing. The best part of it is it's backed up by science and data.
We're very excited because it causes the same dramatic, ridiculously fast changes in depression, anxiety, anger, loneliness, hopelessness, really within 72 minutes now.
Dr. Burns is on a mission to lower the barriers associated with getting help for mental health conditions. He wants to provide low-cost, effective, and quick help to people who need it.
So it's a very dynamic process, and the goal there is to get rapid and profound reductions in those 7 negative feelings. And one thing we've discovered through the statistical modeling is that there's a dark matter in the human psyche or in the human brain, that there's one common cause for all 7 of these negative emotions.
And beyond the data and the techniques, Dr. Burns also has a very special quality, which is that he cares about the people that he's working with.
I treat everyone for free. That's one thing I kept from my hippie days when we were homeless. And I haven't charged anyone for 30 years for psychotherapy.
Really?
And I tell people I'm only going to see you one time. And I'll just sit with you as long as necessary until all your symptoms disappear. And usually I can make that happen.
My name is Dr. Robert Duff. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. I really think you will enjoy this interview with Dr. David Burns. We go into all sorts of stuff. We talk about his background, some stories I'm pretty sure he's never told anywhere before. I think I got him crying a little bit. We talked about the books. We talked about the app. We talked about future directions and what you can do if you just feel stuck in life. So without further ado, enjoy the interview. I am speaking today with a legend in the field of mental health. Dr. David Burns is a psychiatrist, a renowned author, and one of the pioneers of cognitive behavioral therapy. He is the best-selling author of books like Feeling Good and Feeling Great, which have sold, I think, over 7 million copies worldwide. And he has profoundly shaped how we view mental health. With over 40 years of experience in the field, he's continuously revolutionized the way we treat conditions like depression and anxiety. And most recently, he's launched the Feeling Great app, which we'll talk more about. Dr. Burns, it's an honor to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on.
Well, I'm honored to be on the show. Thanks so much. I'm really excited, and we'll see what happens.
Should I be calling you David, Dave, Dr. Burns? What do you prefer?
Whatever you want. I always tell my patient, you call me David or Dr. Burns, because some of them, they want to call you doctor, gives them greater security, and others want to call you David.
Yeah.
And it's more of a personal thing. I kind of like David.
Yep. Yeah. And I like Robert. So that's all
okay.
Good. Just don't call me Shirley.
Yeah. Surely I won't.
Yeah, there we go. So, you've had a very extensive career in the field of psychiatry and mental health. And, certainly you've worked with a lot of titans in the field, I'm sure, that have shaped your approach and how you do things. But what about earlier than that? How did you stumble into the field of mental health in the first place?
Well, let's see. When I was in college, I was a philosophy major. I had roommates who were so much smarter than me who went into physics. And I thought, boy, that'd be so cool. But face it, David, you're not smart enough for physics.
Physics is hard.
Your philosophy might be more up your alley. And so I really loved philosophy. I was at Amherst, and I specialized in philosophy of science. Mm-hmm. And then my senior year, one of my roommates who went into physics suggested I read this book by Wittgenstein for my honors dissertation, or whatever you call it in college. And I said, well, what? I've never heard of Wittgenstein. And he said, well, it's rumored that he solved all the problems of philosophy. And this book was published in 1950 after he died. He never published anything when he was alive. But the thing about it is he was a very lonely fellow because only 7 people in the world understood what he was trying to say. And what he was trying to say was simple. And so he said, if you can understand the book, and then when you have to defend your thesis or whatever to the committee, they won't be able to challenge you because they're not included in the 7 who understand it. So I read that book and I couldn't understand it. But it was about simple things like how you build a wall with bricks, or how a piece of string is manufactured, or what's the essence of a game, if you have to define the word game. And he would tell, it was just numbered paragraphs, unrelated paragraphs on things. And after each paragraph, he'd say, are you ready now to give up the free will problem? And I would say, no, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. What does it have to do with a piece of string? And then in spring, I was walking across the Amherst campus, and it hit me like lightning what he was trying to say. And I saw the solution to all the problems of philosophy that I'd been intrigued with, like, do humans have free will? And suddenly I saw, oh, that's the answer. And I told my supervisor, I don't want to do a PhD in philosophy. I've decided to give up philosophy because that's what Wittgenstein wanted. He wanted all of his students to see that philosophy was largely a lot of BS, but he had a precise way of proving that. And so I thought, well, I love Wittgenstein, so I'll give up philosophy. And I said, I'm going to become a psychologist and do something practical in the world instead of all this philosophy nonsense. And my supervisor says, no, David, you've got to go to medical school and become a psychiatrist. And I said, well, why? That's the only thing I never wanted to be, was a doctor. I'm not even a pre-medical student. I haven't had a biology class since 7th grade. And how could I get into medical school? And he says, oh, don't worry about that. He says, you can talk your way into anything. And I said, well, why would I want to go to medical school? And he says, because drugs are going to become so important, and psychologists can't prescribe drugs. So you can do psychotherapy as a psychiatrist, but you can also prescribe drugs. So I said, oh, all right. And I kind of talked my way into Stanford Medical School.
That's no easy task.
the gift of gab that got me in, to tell you the truth. But I was like a fish out of water. I cut most of my classes. I wasn't interested in any of it. I would look in a microscope, and we were supposed to be able to see epithelium and different tissues. And I couldn't see any tissues. I just saw it was like a modern art thing to me, just colors of swirls. But I just barely made it through medical school. I dropped out for a full year on 2 occasions.
Oh, wow.
And then I never planned to go ahead with my internship or residency because I was so disillusioned by the psychiatrists at Stanford. They seemed kind of very psychodynamic and authoritarian, and I used to go to this Human Institute in Palo Alto where they had these wild psychodrama marathons, and it was frightening to me. But I saw people undergoing really rapid changes. And I said, boy, that's the kind of thing I really wanted to do, to learn some techniques to really help people. And so then I eventually decided to do this. Is getting too long-winded. Shut up, David. Okay.
No, you're the guest here. You can go as long-winded as you'd like.
Okay, sure. But so I eventually ended up homeless in California with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and she was pregnant, and we didn't have a place to live. We would just go around and sleep on people's living room floors if they'd let us. And I used to counsel people. We were down in like Carmel, California, in that neck of the woods, and I would just counsel people for free. It's all I had ever wanted to do. But they didn't take me seriously because it was for free and we didn't have any money to. And then one day it occurred to me, David, if you just went ahead and did an internship and residency, you still wouldn't know anything because it's a lot of BS.
But you'd have a title.
But people would think you know something, and so they'd pay you to talk to you, and then you could have a house, and life would be a lot easier. And you're about to become a father, and that type of thing. So I called Stanford, and I hadn't. It was too late for the match, and I knew if I was in the match, I'd never match anyway because I was such a terrible medical student. And I didn't even know how to use a stethoscope or anything. And I got someone, and I think it was a psychiatric resident in the Department of Psychiatry, and this was like about midsummer. And I said, this is David Burns, and I've decided to do an internship after all, and residency in psychiatry. But I know it's too late for the match, but do you know, maybe there's an opening somewhere? And he said, oh, yeah, there's a Highland Hospital in Oakland, California. It's a huge county hospital. And they didn't match one of their positions, or the fellow got sick and had to drop out. And he said they'll take any warm-blooded person who can speak. So I went up there and talked to them, and they accepted me. And it was just a great experience for me. And I went to the other extreme, and I started working like a hornet. And I was so grateful, and I think it was good for me because we had all very poor people who came, primarily horribly sick people. Mm-hmm. The staff were just gifted. They were so kindly and loving, and I just really learned medicine, and I couldn't believe it. I became a real doctor and a good one. And then my second year, the pathologist said, you shouldn't be here at Highland Hospital. And I said, well, why not? I love it here. And she said, you should be in a high-powered academic center. And I said, well, anyone who looks at my medical school record, they would never have me. And she said, well, here, look at this ad. And it was an ad for a research residency position at the University of Pennsylvania. And she said, why don't you apply for this? I said, oh, no one at Stanford. They would just tell them what a loser I was. And she said, well, I'll write you a damn good letter. Mm-hmm. And I bet you'll get in because you're doing fantastic work here at Highland Hospital and you belong in a place like that. So I applied, and sure enough, I got in, and we drove our old VW back to University of Pennsylvania, and I started continued working really hard, 7 days a week, and I started winning awards for my research on brain chemistry and this chemical imbalance theory, and did what my supervisors said. They you talk to people, just say, tell me more, and then you give them these antidepressants. And I never saw a single person recover. Mm. And it was like a sham. And it just bothered me because there's all these people making all kinds of money, but all I ever wanted to do was like what we did in psychodrama, see people go from tears to joy in a matter of, maybe an hour or something like that. And then I heard about Beck's work, and the department chairman said, you ought to check this out if you don't like what you're doing. This is something new. He says that negative thoughts cause depression. I said, oh, that sounds like so much horse shit. Sounds really? Like Norman Vincent Peale. I know my patients have negative thoughts. They say, I'm no good, I'm a loser. But you can't change serious, heavy depression by some changing thinking. And he says, well, why don't you just go to his seminar, for his weekly seminar for a while, and you can try it with some of your most severe patients and satisfy yourself that it's no good. As it'd be kind of like a part of your research, an informal part of your research. I said, sure, I'll do that. And I went, and I started using the techniques with my patients, and they started turning the corner on horrible depression and anxiety. And they kept asking for more and more. And at first, I couldn't understand why they were getting better. And then I began to see this theory really appears to be correct. And I told my supervisor that I was going to leave the university and go into private practice so I could do cognitive therapy. And he says, no, you can't do that. You've got a huge grant to develop a brain serotonin research laboratory here at the medical school. You're famous all over the world for your work on brain chemistry. And I says, yeah, but I know that this chemical imbalance theory, our own work has proven that it's false. It's a fraud. It's not true that depression is due to a chemical imbalance in the brain. So I don't want to waste my life studying that wrong theory. And he kept saying, oh, you'll never do research. You're burning bridges. You've got a fantastic career in academic psychiatry. He says, I'll show you how you can test drugs for drug companies. You'll make millions of dollars on the side. And I said, I don't want to do that either because I've given these. We had Prozac in the 1970s. It was called Lilly 11014. We got everything before they were officially released. And I said, I don't. We have this depression research unit with 30 depressed veterans that were, and I've been there for a year and a half, and it's all the same veterans are there that were there a year and a half. Not a single one of them has recovered. And why would I want to spend my life doing that? So I left the university and stayed on as a voluntary faculty member, and really threw myself into cognitive therapy, and it was just like being in Wonderland or something. And Beck had some techniques, but they were kind of dry and a little on the boring side, and so I started developing more powerful techniques, more like what I'd seen in psychodrama, and over the years kind of first I wrote Feeling Good, which was classical cognitive therapy. And then it's now morphed into something we call TEAM CBT, right, which is like cognitive therapy on steroids. And finally I'm at the place now where I can work with people using gentle but powerful techniques and see dramatic changes. When I work with, I treat everyone for free. That's one thing I kept from my hippie days when we were homeless. And I haven't charged anyone for 30 years for psychotherapy.
Really?
And I tell people, I'm only going to see you one time. And I'll just sit with you as long as necessary until all your symptoms disappear. And usually I can make that happen if it's depression and anxiety, not if it's a psychosis, but within a single 2-hour session, based on measures at the start and end of the session, see scores go from on a 0 to 100 scales, like 80, 90, 100 depressed and guilty and ashamed and anxious and hopeless and angry, go down to near 0 or all zeros. And that's kind of my career in a capsule. And I'm glad I left the university. I'm still associated with Stanford on the voluntary faculty. I'm on an adjunct professor of psychiatry. But again, it's a voluntary type thing. And I've done a lot of research. And then eventually this group approached me and because a fellow had been a Stanford student and been just horrifically depressed, and he went to ACT therapy and DBT and antidepressants, and nothing helped him. And then someone says, "Oh, you ought to go to one of Dr. Burns' students. Go to Matt May. He's doing something completely different." And so he went. And in 2 weeks, he said he went from, thinking life wasn't worth living to a state of euphoria. And then he started bugging me saying, could we make an app that could do this? And I put him off and put him off and put him off. But eventually, 4 or 5 years ago, I said, let's see what we can do. Because he had started his work with DoorDash and had earned a pile of money there. And he said, I'll put up some money to get us started. And we started developing the Feeling Good app. And now it's morphed into the Feeling Great app. And we're very excited because it causes the same dramatic, ridiculously fast changes in depression, anxiety, anger, loneliness, hopelessness, really within 72 minutes now. Now that we've got AI, it's learned to do what I do. And we're going bankrupt because we don't know how to sell it. And we give it away for free to anyone who can't afford it. It's $99 a year. And we've sold a few hundred subscriptions, but we've got to get into the thousands to survive. So that's what we're trying to do now. That's why I'm so glad to be on your show, to let people know they can go and take a free ride on the Feeling Great app. And then if you like it, it's 27 cents a day. And if you can't afford that, we'll give it to you for free. And but that's my career from start to finish.
There you go. We're done. No, thank you for all of that. In listening to you talk about your career all the way through, you're a really interesting mix of a lot of the steps along the way. You were saying, they told me to do this, so I went ahead and did that. And they said, do this, so I went ahead and did that. But at the same time, you had kind of this really strong BS meter and kind of bravery to say, I don't want to do that, though. That's what everyone's saying, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, right.
Where does that come from? Have you always been that way since you were young?
It's hard to say. My parents, when I was little, said, you're very hard to get along with, and that was true. And
great thing to say to your kid.
But then at Amherst, the one thing that I really learned at Amherst was critical thinking and how to see through things. And I'm shocked at how naive human beings still are for the most part. And the philosophy of science training that I had really helped me to be a critical thinker, and that you've got to measure things in order to do anything meaningful, and most therapists refuse to measure things. And I say, if you're not measuring things at the start and end of sessions, you have no way of knowing if you're effective or not. And I did a study in the Stanford inpatient unit to see how accurate are therapists in knowing how patients feel. And I had experts interview 178 consecutively admitted patients with severe enough to require hospitalization. And I had them do a up to 4-hour interview with the patient, just talking about the patient's feelings in order to assign DSM diagnoses, is what the interview was for. And then at the end, and they didn't know I was going to do this, I had them turn their backs to each other, the doctor and the patient, and I gave the patient my scales. I have brief, accurate scales for depression, anxiety, suicidal urges, anger, therapeutic empathy, things like that. I told the patient, just rate the person who you've just spent 3 or 4 hours with and how you're feeling at this instant right now. And then I told the experts, fill out the same scale, how you think that patient is feeling. You've just spent an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours talking only about that patient's feelings. So fill out how depressed you think they are, how suicidal, how angry, how anxious, and how empathic you think you were in the session. And so I could get the accuracy of experts at a top academic setting.
Yeah.
And the results were pretty mind-blowing. The accuracy of depression, picking up changes in depression, was 3%.
Yeah.
Anger was 0%. Suicidal thoughts or urges was 0% accurate. Anxiety was probably 5 or 6%, and therapeutic empathy was the highest, 9%, which means the therapist had no idea how they were coming across, and no idea how the patients were feeling. And that just showed me the tremendous importance of measuring things. And yet a lot in our field refuse to do that. In fact, one of my students that I was supervising at Amherst was threatened by another supervisor that they might kick him out of the residency program for using the scales I had developed.
Wow.
Because his other supervisor was psychoanalytic, and he said these scales will destroy the therapeutic relationship. I don't know what the hell that means, but they certainly allow you to heal people quickly and to learn from your patients, because your patients will tell you when you're failing, when you're not helping them. And if you use those measures, that's how I developed my skills. I've measured with every patient at every session since 1978. I've refused to see a patient without the measurements. Mm-hmm. So my patients have been my greatest teachers. But our field is, I'm sad and angry about it, because it's a series of cults, to my way of thinking. And I'm trying to develop a science-based, data-driven approach to therapy, where the goal is to change patients or individuals, clients, whatever word you want to use, quickly. That depression, anxiety, loneliness, we want to change, anger, change those things in patients very, very quickly. And I've seen that it can be done. And yet the field is just still clunking along with these cults that they've joined, and they think they have the answers, and they feel
when
like
you say
cults,
cults,
don't measure.
When you say cults, do you mean like different kind of theoretical orientations, like the cult of
exactly.
DBT or what have you?
Yeah, exactly. You've heard of Albert Ellis, right?
Yeah.
And I really admired him. He was a kook, but he was brilliant, and he was honest, and he gave credit to other people. He didn't try to steal other people's ideas. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know him well, but I once sat next to him at a dinner in his honor. Word got back to him that Dr. Burns is one of your admirers, Al, and he praises you in his workshop. So he was very narcissistic, like I am, and so he loved hearing that I really admired him.
Yeah.
So they would sit me next to him. And once he was telling me that he knew almost all of the greats of 20th century psychology, Fritz Perls and Carl Rogers and, Jung, I think, and,
Sure.
all of these famous people. And he says, David, that's the way he talked, kind of a New York twang. He said, well, these people are a bunch of sociopaths. And they're just gurus with followers, and they're not honest, and they're just trying to promote themselves. They're not scientists. And when I heard that, it was really shocking to me. But as I thought about it, I came to see that it was really true. The people that I knew who were big name people were, in fact, exactly like that, self-promoting.
Cult of personality, sort of.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like a religion with a cult leader, and you have to believe the way the cult is, and you're not allowed to challenge anything, and nothing's measured. It's all being claimed, and I think that's what's holding our field back. And the Catholic Church. The early astronomers broke away from the Catholic Church to make an independent, science-based, data-driven field of astrophysics. And look where it is now. It's unbelievable the way it's evolved, and rocketry and understanding the universe. Mental health could be like that too, if we would break away from these cults and go take a new science-based, data-driven approach to psychotherapy, and do research on what really changes people. So that's what I'm referring to. But when I say this to academic audiences, a lot of them get pretty angry with me because they don't like hearing that their psychodynamic therapy or their psychoanalytic therapy or their ACT or their DBT or whatever cult they're in, that it is just a cult. and that they should drop out of that cult and get into science and measuring things and learning how to help people using a wide variety of approaches.
Yeah. So there was like a 40-year gap, I think, between your two books, right?
Yeah,
Between Feeling
that's
Good, Feeling
right.
Great. And in that time, from what I understand, the approach that you developed did become a lot more integrative.
Yeah,
Pulling
yes,
pieces from where they
it
need to come
evolved
from.
dramatically from the early cognitive therapy, and I still use a lot of cognitive techniques, but I draw on at least a dozen different schools of therapy, and the approach that we call it TEAM for TEAM CBT, TEAM cognitive therapy, for testing, empathy, paradoxical agenda setting, and methods. And it morphed both because of my research that I typically published in psychology journals like Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology, and I got certain insights that were tremendously important, and from my clinical work, because in the early days, when Beck started out, when I was going to his weekly cognitive therapy seminars, there was only maybe a dozen cognitive therapists in the world, and everyone thought we were quacks. And then, I started my practice and treated tremendous numbers of people with cognitive therapy, but he was in the Gerard Bank buildings where he set up his clinic on the fifth floor, and I had my office on the third floor, and they would refer patients to me, and almost all of them had what's called borderline personality disorder, and which is the most severe form of depression, and it's people with it struggle tremendously, and most therapists are kind of afraid to try to treat them because they can be very challenging and moods oscillating in dangerous ways.
Sure.
But I thought, well, boy, Beck must think I'm really good because he's sending me all these difficult patients. And then years later, I found out that they sent me all the patients they didn't want in their clinic, kind of. But because of that, I had such extreme cases. And so I really had to hone my skills and develop a lot to find ways of treating the most severe of the most severe, and it was exciting all along the way. But I had to change many things because a lot of people responded quickly to cognitive therapy, but a lot of patients were fighting me and opposing me, and and I had to figure out how to help those patients as well. And eventually what I was doing was so different from Beckian traditional cognitive therapy, I decided to give it a new name. But what I do isn't a new cult or a new school of therapy, but it's more of a structure based on research for how all effective therapy works.
Yeah, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but the kind of M of the approach is methods, right? And so it's essentially figuring out what methods are going to be most helpful and applying those regardless of sort of, it's a little bit agnostic in that way. It's like regardless of the orientation.
Absolutely agnostic. The only thing I care about is what works.
Yeah.
But I had to develop new methods all the time because in the early days, my patients were so severe. So I would sometimes create 2 or 3 new techniques every therapy session. And when I found something that worked, I'd say, let me try this with a few more patients. And if 3 or 4 patients were helped by it, I would give it a name so I could teach it. And so now there's, I think, roughly 140 techniques that we use. And then there's ways to choose the techniques that are most likely to be helpful, depending on if the patient is struggling with, self-criticism and depression and inadequacy and worthlessness, or if they're having panic attacks or social anxiety, or if they're having a marital or a relationship problem or a habit or addiction, that the approach is, quite different from depending on what the target is. But the key to it, in the early days, you see, Beck thought everything was cognitions, negative thoughts, self-defeating beliefs. And I remember I was once at a meeting in the psychology department at Penn, and one of the psychologists said, cognition, that's all well and good, but it doesn't motivation come in, doesn't resistance play a role? And I thought, boy, this guy is stupid. He's so old-fashioned. And then over the years, I came to see that was absolutely right, and began to work on reducing resistance in my patients, and that's what really transformed the therapy into something that is revolutionary, I think. And we've also been able to train the AI in our app to do that as well, to reduce the resistance of people who come to the app. And then we've got all of these methods to help them change the way they're beating up on themselves.
Yeah. Can you talk more about the resistance piece, like what that actually means and how you work with that?
Yeah, because that's been totally unexpected, the direction that has taken, and it's been the most unique aspect of my work, I think, although everything in TEAM is pretty different from the original cognitive therapy, pretty radically different. But if you ask most mental health professionals, do some patients resist recovery? They'll say, oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, Freud spent his whole career trying to understand resistance and find a way to overcome it. And then, well, why do you think patients, might resist recovery from depression? And there's all these negative ways of looking at it. Oh, they like to feel sorry for themselves, or they're trying to get attention that way. And those formulations are kind of cruel, and they're like put downs. It's viewing the patient as a kind of a self-centered, pouty child, and maybe reflects the frustration of therapists more than the reality of the patients. But what I've learned is that the resistance comes from the exact opposite direction. Let me see if I can give you an example that the patients cling to depression and anxiety and shame and guilt and loneliness and hopelessness and anger and all negative feelings, not because of what's defective about them, but what's most beautiful and awesome about them. And it's the exact opposite direction that the field has gone in. The DSM is all disorder-based. You have mental disorders, and you have to go and get fixed by somebody. And I'll give you an example. I recently treated a woman who was a psychiatrist, and she was in a state of extreme anxiety because essentially of her perfectionism. She treats anxiety, specializes in short-term treatment of anxiety, but she had 2 patients she was stuck with, and all the rest are doing really great. And she tried and couldn't break anything open with these 2 patients, and she started beating up on herself and saying, I'm a fraud and a failure. I have no right to charge people money. I need to get a new career, or I'm not smart enough to be a psychiatrist. And she was to the point where she couldn't sleep at night, was, and just sure she was terribly defective. And after empathizing at the beginning of the session, I always empathize, and I ask the patient, what grade am I getting on empathy? And I don't stop the empathy phase until I get an A. Or an A plus, maybe, and then I go on to melting away the resistance. At that point, I say, "What would you want if we had a miracle in today's session? What miracle would you ask for?" And she said, "Well, all these negative thoughts and feelings would disappear." And I said, "Okay, imagine we have a magic button here, red magic button, and if you press it, you'll go into a state of instant euphoria. And all your negative thoughts and feelings will disappear with no effort at all. Would you press it?" And almost every patient says, "Yes, where's the button? I'll press it in a heartbeat." And then I say, "Well, of course, there's no magic button, but I do have some pretty magical techniques, and it's possible we could make all your negative thoughts and feelings disappear in today's session. In fact, I predict that is going to happen, but I don't think that would be right to do that. I don't think it would be a good idea." And then the patient typically says, well, why not? I've been in therapy for 20 years and no one's been able to help, or whatever. And I'm in hell.
Yeah.
And I say, well, before I show you these techniques, let's do a little exercise together. And let's see if there might be some positives hidden in your negative feelings. And Amy, you're feeling very anxious and ashamed and guilty and depressed and discouraged because you're stuck with two of your patients. What do those negative feelings show about you that's positive and awesome? And how might those negative feelings be helping you or helping your patients? And at first she didn't get it. And so, I kind of primed the pump a little bit. I said, well, do your negative thoughts show that you have high standards? And she says, oh, absolutely. I said, well, that's a good thing. Put that down on the list of positives. And have your high standards inspired you to do hard work and learn tremendous and achieve lots? She's on the teaching faculty of one of the East Coast medical schools, one of the famous ones. She says, yeah. And it motivates me to, when I'm stuck with patients, to find out why I'm stuck and try to find a better way to treat them. And I said, is that real? She said, absolutely. I said, is that powerful? She said, absolutely. I said, is that important? She said, absolutely. So I'll add that to the list of positives. And then she got on a roll and was able to see, she's putting herself down. Well, that shows her humility. And that's a very real thing about her. To meet her, you fall in love with her almost immediately because she's so humble and warm. And her sadness shows how much she cares for her patients. And, it just took maybe 15 minutes and we came up with a list of, 10, 12, 15, or 20 awesome things about her. And then I said, now, Amy, look at this list. Are these things about you important? Oh, yes, they're important, Dr. Burns. Are they powerful? Oh, yes, they're powerful. Are they true? Oh, yes, they're true. And I said, so if you press that magic button, Amy, your negative feelings will disappear and go down the toilet, and all these beautiful things about you are going to go down the toilet right along with them. Why would you want to do a thing like that? And now I've paradoxed her,
right,
and I've become her subconscious mind. But the reason she's resisting is because of these beautiful things about her. And then the moment she sees this, and she can't deny it, you see, she's saying, yes, this is true, yes to those things. And then suddenly her shame disappears. She can be proud of her depression, her anger, her rage, her anxiety, her shame, her guilt, her aloneness, her feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. You can be proud of them. And the moment she becomes proud of them, which she did, and she saw it, it was like a light bulb. At that moment, suddenly her resistance disappears. And then we go into the methods. And in the old days, I used to have to do 10, 15 methods before a patient could crush their thoughts. Now, 2 or 3 methods, which was the case with her, and she can blow her negative thoughts out of the water.
She was ready for it.
Yeah, what can you tell yourself instead of you're a failure? She said, well, I could tell myself that I'm, stuck with 2 of my patients, and that doesn't make me a failure. I'm actually got so many successes. I have a waiting line of people wanting to see me. But it's not a shameful thing to be stuck with your patients. But maybe instead of beating up on myself, I could get a consultation on these 2, learn some few new tips and techniques, and make it a chance for learning rather than self-hatred. And I said, how much do you believe that? She said, 100%. Now, how much do you believe I'm a fraud and a failure? She said, 0%. And that's a quick version of what actually took maybe 15 minutes, and all of her feelings went to 0. And then she was in a state of not recovery, but a state of enlightenment and joy, because she saw the absurdity and the cruelty of what she'd been doing to herself. And she found the voice within herself to love and support herself. That's a simplistic overview of how it works.
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I see why you mentioned the paradoxical element of it. It's very reminiscent of negotiation tactics, actually, that, getting someone on board. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah,
show them
right.
this, and they're like, huh. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And in negotiation, if you find truth in the other person's point of view, then suddenly they want to give you what you want too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that
right.
rapport building and empathy and such at the beginning. Very good. I want to take a slight turn and talk more about the app. And one thing that's really interesting is when you were coming up in school, you were around for like the dawn of chat bots. I don't know if are you aware of Eliza, like the first humanistic?
Yes, when I was at Stanford, one of the psychiatric residents, when I was just a medical student hanging out as a hippie in Palo Alto, he said, "You've got to see this thing, Elijah," and he brought it to me, and he was all excited. And that must have been let's see, I was a medical student. That must have been in the 1960s,
late 60s,
late 1960s. Yeah, and he was all thrilled about it. And then it took 50 years or 40 years for the new version to emerge.
So it's kind of a full circle thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it was kind of fun, but it was kind of dorky too, and it wasn't really powerful. But now we've got I gave a lecture at a depression and anxiety conference, a keynote address on this Sunday. It was sponsored by the Erickson Foundation on the app, and because there was a spot on 60 Minutes recently on digital therapy, and they emphasized that healing can only occur in a human context. That was one claim they made. And that occurs at the moment of empathy, when you and you have to have 2 humans in the same room. And when you look at the other person, you say, "I've got you. I understand." That's when the healing occurs. That was the second claim they made. The third claim they made is a computer can't do this. And so we actually tested that in a beta test we did with 290 people about a year and a half ago. And we compared human versus digital empathy and asked which is more healing and which is better. And the way they rated the warmth and understanding they received from our app was like 80% higher than the warmth and understanding they received from humans in their life. And it had the app had exactly the same causal effect. The app's empathy had the same causal effect from a mathematical point of view as human empathy. The causal coefficient was exactly the same. There was no significant differences. But the only difference was that the human empathy was so poor that the amount of reduction in negative feelings was tiny. Whereas the amount of change in negative feelings with the app was, hundreds of times greater than that and faster than that. But the empathy, it was not the major healing factor in the app, but it is amazingly empathic, and it's heartwarming to see how kind and insightful our newest version, the Feeling Great app, is. One of our technicians who's helping with the AI, he joined our team, Jason Mino, because he has had very severe diabetes since he's been a child, type 1 diabetes, and he has been horrifically depressed and at the verge of suicide and throughout his life, and that's why he wanted to join our team, because he was a beta tester and said that this is something that's helping me. And now he's become this, not only a great friend, but he's programming our AI and doing an amazing job. But he always tested on it himself to see if it's credible. And I remember he was telling the AI that he was sad, and the AI asked him, well, why is that? And Jason, he's a single guy, and but a very warm and really awesome person. And he said, because I love my cat so much, and my cat is 11 years old, and one of these days I'm afraid she's going to die and I'm going to lose her. And he was on the verge of tears. And then the app said, oh, I understand what you're saying. You're not just afraid of losing a pet, your cat, you're afraid of losing your best friend.
Right.
And then he started sobbing. And I mean, it was a beautiful thing. I've never seen a therapist who was that good with empathy. It's just amazing. And my dream ever since I started learning cognitive therapy, I've been telling people, I think I could make an automated version of this that would be as good or better than I am. And no one listened to me until Jeremy Carmel, who's our CEO of our little app development group, came along, and he says, I believe you, and let's make that dream a reality. And so I'm just so glad to have had this opportunity. And and then a fellow, we couldn't raise any money, and Jeremy was afraid of asking people for money, and we needed to get money for our app, and we were on the verge of extinction. And then this fellow contacted me and said, I want to talk to you guys. And I didn't know who he was, but he said he'd been to one of my intensive conferences that I used to put on once a year. We've started it up again. It's a 4-day conference for mental health professionals. We call it the Intensive. And he said, I was at your intensive, and I saw you working miracles with people. And I'm a venture capitalist, and I want to invest in your company and see if we can make this happen. Because if we can, it's going to change the world. So he's with us now. In fact, we have a board meeting tomorrow. So nice. we hope he won't scold us. We have to tell him what we're doing and stuff. But that's how the app came into existence. And then Jeremy was able to hire 3 engineers to do the programming, and I've been dictating classes and lessons, and Jason's been doing the AI. So it's really coming along. And I'm thinking, what is this going to be like in 100 years? Because already people can make greater gains in 72 minutes, the first 72 minutes with the app, than if you see in outcome studies with traditional cognitive therapy or antidepressants lasting 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, people will maybe have a 50% reduction in depression. Well, we're seeing greater than that in 72 minutes, and plus 6 other negative feelings at the same time. So I think there's remarkably power. I don't think an app is ever going to replace human beings or always be a place for the human connection and human therapist.
Sure.
But I think a human therapist who combines the app, the Feeling Great app, with their face-to-face therapy will be a fantastic combination that will be like nothing the world's ever seen before.
Well, one of the worst things about therapy as it stands is you meet with somebody for 50 minutes, once a week at most, usually. And, that opportunity for change is very narrow. What about the rest of the time? Right.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the barrier to entry for what you're talking about is so low. That's really great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I that once a week therapy has never made sense. There's never any research about it. That's why I do 2-hour sessions, because I can complete a course of treatment in 2 hours most of the time.
And you do it for free, so you don't have to worry about insurance.
Yeah, that's why I give a money-back guarantee,
a
lifetime money-back guarantee of my work. And then I tell people, if you ever have a relapse you can't handle, just come on back. I'll give you a tune-up, and I hope you relapse like crazy. And they say, well, why is that, Dr. Burns? I said, because I'm just getting to know you and like you. And if you don't relapse, I'll never see you again. And that makes me really sad. So please try to have some problems you can't solve. But most of them, I never see them again. And it's sad because I just love working with people and seeing somebody go from tears to laughter and joy. It's like nothing else I can imagine. That people have often says, well, how about empathy fatigue? Don't you get empathy fatigue, Dr. Burns? And I said, there's no such thing as empathy fatigue. Other people can't make you unhappy. Your thoughts create all of your emotions. I used to see 17 patients on Wednesdays for full sessions, and they were, every one of them was severely depressed. And it was my happiest day of the week.
Wow.
Because it was just getting higher and higher as the day evolved, because I was telling myself, I have something to give to this patient, to help this patient change his or her or their life. And but empathy fatigue comes when you're giving yourself negative messages and you're angry or you're upset about something, and you're not having that warm, healing relationship.
How are you doing for time right now?
I'm doing good. I'm a talker.
No, that's great. I wanted to keep talking for a bit, but if we need to wrap it up, I can move that way.
No, let's keep going. I love your questions. I can give little short answers too. If you like.
Everything's going smoothly. I just wanted to make sure I'm respecting your time.
Thank you. No, I'm enjoying it. I just love talking to you, and this is another kind of dream for me, is to be able to talk and have people hear about my life and my career and what I've developed that might change their life.
You're in your 80s now, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be 82 day after tomorrow.
Wild. That sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
So obviously, just mathematically, you're closer to the end of your career than you are to the start of it. Is this part of your legacy, the app and moving things in this direction?
That's what I'm hoping, and also I'm hoping we'll be able to keep the podcasts alive. A lot of people have listened to all 400 podcasts. In fact, the majority of our audience have been there since they've gone from the very start. And then in my books, and I am kind of focusing on my legacy, but also I would say this has been my most productive and creative phase of my life. And I'm learning all the time on many different levels. I've always worked as a lone wolf for most of my life because, as my parents said, I'm hard to get along with. And so being on an app team with other people there's a lot of fights that come up, and we're all flawed, and sometimes get annoyed with each other, and have to learn humility and warmth, and hearing where the other person is coming from. And so I've been learning a lot on that level, as well as I get all kinds of data from the app. I get hundreds of thousands of data points, and then I model them with mathematical models. And so I have tremendous opportunities for research and discovery. And it's kind of like being in heaven, except it's exhausting, and there's a lot of sleepless nights when you're upset about something, or upset with somebody, or not understanding something. But I'm very grateful that for what Jeremy has made happen to create the Feeling Great Corporation, and to have some really caring investors who are making it possible for us to hire people who we need to get things done. And I don't know anything about business, and my main thing is just to create classes and lessons, and help with the development of the AI to make our AI tool as powerful as possible. And if it's the way it appears to be, and if we can, get some people to want to buy the app, so we can pay our bills and survive and prosper, there's just so much more we want to do with the app, and just make it cooler and more awesome all the time, more powerful, more effective. We're working right now on why people relapse, or with the negative thoughts and feelings come back for all of us. No one can be happy all the time. And what are the factors that bring on these relapses, and what can we do to make those relapses short and mild, rather than prolonged and serious and painful? There's just a lot of opportunities, but I think the field is still pretty backward. There are certainly a lot of gems out there, and a lot of hardworking and dedicated and beautiful, talented people. And a number of my students have become extremely skillful therapists. But it's hard for therapists to learn therapy and to become good or even great therapists. And but so I think the app can fill a real void that humans are not so well able to fill that void right now. And I think a lot of people, just like with my first book, Feeling Good, a lot of people who read it recovered from depression within 4 weeks. There's been many research studies that have confirmed that. So some people with the app, it'll probably be all they need. But other people will need more. Will have more severe, more refractory problems. Will need a human to make it a teamwork. And you can go to your human once a week and have a great empathic dialogue and keep track of your progress. And then you got David here in your hand 24 hours a day. All the rest of the time you can have a tune-up at 3 a.m. if you want, and I'll be right there in AI form.
You're immortalized.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
Living in science fiction. That's really interesting. So the app itself, like, what is the structure of it? If I were to go down the app and start using it?
Yeah, there's 2 pieces to it, and we're trying to figure out how to integrate those 2. First, if you go into the chat bot, the AI chat bot, it starts asking you right away, is there some problem going on, something that you're upset about? And then it empathizes with you in the way that I mentioned earlier, and then it asks you to grade it, and it'll continue to empathize until you give it an A on empathy, and that empathy is the bot has really nailed it, and you feel cared about and understood. And then after that, it goes into what changes would you like to see? Kind of like I mentioned with Amy, would you press this magic button and make all your negative feelings and thoughts disappear? And let's look at all the reasons not to do that, and what your thoughts and feelings show about you that's beautiful and awesome. And that's where their feelings really begin to change at that juncture. And then once that resistance is melted away, then we go into methods, and the bot can role play with you. Like I developed this really powerful technique called externalization of voices, and it's similar but safer than the psychodrama I was doing as a medical student. But it kind of it becomes the negative you and attacks you with your own thoughts. And then it teaches you how to defeat itself, how to crush those thoughts, and keeps doing role reversals. So it's a very dynamic process, and the goal there is to get rapid and profound reductions in those 7 negative feelings. And one thing we've discovered through the statistical modeling is that there's a dark matter in the human psyche, or in the human brain, that there's one common cause for all 7 of these negative emotions, which we didn't know when we started creating the app. We hadn't thought of that, but the statistics has confirmed that there's something in our psyches that causes feelings of depression, anxiety, shame, worthlessness, loneliness, hopelessness, and anger simultaneously. It causes all of them and accounts for most of the variance. Like if you're into statistics, 90% or more of the variance in all 7 negative feelings. And we've also proven that the way the app works is by attacking that common cause and causing it to get reduced. We don't know what it is yet. We can measure its mean,
right,
and we can prove that it exists. But it's like the dark matter in the universe. Scientists can prove it exists, but they don't know what it is yet. And this is the same type of deal. That's how the app works. But then anyway, that's the chatbot. The other part of the app is classes and lessons.
Okay.
And it's really kind of me talking to you in little short, like 3 or 4 minute lessons on essential things. Like a lot of people don't believe that emotions are all caused by thoughts. And so the first lesson is you think the way you feel, and talk about Epictetus and what he claimed 2,000 years ago, and that people are not disturbed by things, but by their views of them. And then I have little exercises to make this obvious. Say, for example, right now, I can't make you feel a particular way. Only you can by the way you're interpreting what I'm saying. And so you might be thinking, boy, this Burns sure sounds like a con artist. And I probably do. So then you're feeling angry. And then someone else might be thinking, oh, this app, these classes and lessons, this sounds too hard for me. I'm not smart enough for this. And if you're thinking that, then you're feeling inadequate and discouraged. And then someone else might be thinking, oh, I'm too severe to be helped by an app. I'll be depressed for the rest of my life. And I'm feeling really hopeless, and if you're thinking that way, you're feeling hopeless and really down. And then someone else might be thinking, "Wow, this app it sounds fantastic. This is maybe going to help me change the way I think and feel, change my life." Then you're feeling happy, and so you can see you're all hearing me say the same thing, but you're all feeling differently because of your thoughts. And so there's little things like that. And the classes and lessons teach all about, these basic principles and ideas. Where do our feelings come from? And
are these audio? The classes? Is it like audio? Or okay?
Yeah, they're audio, and they're going to go into 2-way audio now with the latest chat. So that you can, instead of typing into the app, you can talk and it'll talk back to you. then that's our latest, upgrade
Yeah.
of it, and that's going to be huge. So people don't have to type all the time on smartphones. But then there's a lot of these classes that I've on the hidden emotion technique, and you can get your PhD in should statements, and let's define terms, just various things, relapse prevention training, various things that if you want to have that deeper experience, the classes and lessons will help get you there to understand the philosophy behind it. The goal with the app isn't just a reduction in negative feelings, but to bring people, if possible, to a state of enlightenment, which is not permanent, but you can get into a temporary state of enlightenment, which is beyond recovery. It's like you're just feeling joy. And well, like right now, I'm talking to you. I can hardly believe my luck. I'm on your podcast. How fantastic is that for David? You see, and you start to notice things, and how great it is to have a cat who loves you, and what you can learn from a cat, and your ego dies, and you're kind of reborn into a different kind of experience of life and other people, and you're no longer afraid of failure or ashamed of your flaws, or so irritated toward other people. That we're trying to create, that's more of a spiritual dimension.
Sure.
And we're trying to make that happen through the classes and lessons, as well to a certain extent as the chat bot. So there's two different things. And to date, the classes and lessons and the AI, who's really working with you on your own problems, have about comparable healing power and very potent, but the chatbot is just much quicker, whereas it takes a while to listen to the classes and do the exercises and master the concepts.
A lot of people have a hard time getting started, and I can imagine the chatbot is great for helping them get to a point where they're ready to do some of the lessons.
Yeah, that's right. And we're trying to figure out how these two universes, they're like two parallel universes in the app, and how can we integrate them, and how should they be integrated? And we haven't quite solved that yet, but there's two very different kinds of experiences, and you can there's also stories. I'm a storyteller, and there's just
I didn't notice.
Yeah, that you can listen to, and we're thinking of creating a dashboard with people so they can put all their favorite stories there and go back and listen to them. Stories of people who have changed, who seem like impossibly severe, and who rapidly turn their lives around. And those things that can be healing too. One of them is the story at the beginning of Feeling Great. We had this man at the house working painting or carpenter or something, and he was an older fellow, but he was just doing this beautiful work. And my wife and I kept saying, "Boy, are we lucky to have this guy, working on our shed and some of the problems with the exterior of the house." And he was just like a craftsman. And his last day, he was at our front door kneeling and working on something, painting something, or I can't remember what it was, but he was fixing something. He looked up to me, and he looked tearful. And I said, "Gosh, I was just coming down to tell you how much Melanie and I appreciate what you've been doing the last several weeks. And but you look sad." And he said, well, I heard that you're some kind of doctor, and I don't know if you could help me, but I think there's something wrong with me. And I said, "Well, tell me what you're thinking." And he says, "Well, I haven't done anything since high school except, paint people's houses and do carpentry for people. And I was just thinking that my life hasn't amounted to anything, that I haven't made any great inventions or done anything spectacular. And I practically burst out crying hearing him say that, because I had so much admiration for him. I was trying to tell him how great my wife and I thought he was, and how blessed we felt to have him in our life. And then I said to him, well, it sounds to me like you're really, really depressed, and I'm so sad to hear that. But if you'd like, I would try a technique with you. It might not help. I have so many techniques, but we could try just a little quick experiment here. And I said, it's called the double standard technique. A lot of us are really hard on ourselves when we wouldn't be hard on others. So suppose I was a kind of a colleague of yours, and I'm just like you, like an identical twin, and I've been painting people's houses since I left high school, and now I'm getting older, and it's getting time to retire, and I'm saying that my life hasn't amounted to anything. What would you say to me? Would you talk to me the way you're talking to yourself and say, your life hasn't amounted to anything? And he said, oh, yes, I sure would. I said, okay, tell that to me. I'm your friend. Tell me your life hasn't amounted to anything. All you have done is paint people's houses. And then he got it, and he says, no, wait, I could never say that to someone. And I said, well, why not? He says, because it would be cruel, and it's not really true. And I said, what would you say to me? He said, I think I'd tell you that you've been honest with every client, and you've given people their money's worth and more, and you've beautified people's houses and lives, and you can be proud of what you've done, because you've had an honorable and fantastic life. You have everything to be proud of. And I said, is that true, what you're telling me? He says, oh, absolutely, that's true. I said, so if that's true of me, and I'm a clone of yours, it must be true of yourself. Did you ever think you could talk to yourself that way instead of telling yourself you're a nothing? And then he got it, and he says, oh, doctor, thank you. My depression just disappeared. And I was just so happy to be able to do that. But you see people all over who are suffering, and often you can't tell from the outside that they're suffering so much inside. And that gives me the greatest feeling in the world, is to be able to bring that healing to people and to bring joy to people. But it's so sad.
I can see that it impacts you still to this day.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of those types of stories collected in the app. Great. Yeah. Straight from your heart to the app.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the app then is out now for people to get, correct?
Yeah, it's in both of the app stores, and we're also doing something called Feeling Great for the Web, where you can, I think, be able to go to our website, feelinggreat.com, and actually start using it without even having to sign up or anything, just to try it experimentally.
Yeah.
But you can go to the app stores and download it if you're interested, and then you can use it for free for a week and see if you like it, and then you can have another free week trial to make sure you want it. And if you want it and you can't afford the $99 for the year subscription, you just write to us, and then we'll give it to you for free, because we don't want anyone who needs help to not be able to get that help.
And you want to make sure
emphasize that we're not promoting the app as a therapy substitute at all. And anyone who's seriously depressed or suicidal, you have to have a face-to-face contact with the human. But the app is classified, at least at the moment, as just a wellness device. But the goal is to help you change the way you think and feel, to go from misery to joy.
Mm-hmm.
And if any of you would have that, or right now you're thinking that you're not as happy as you'd like to be, you might want to give the app a try, because you have nothing to lose and you've got the world to gain. There's nothing greater than going from depression to joy. It's one of the most amazing experiences a human being can have.
Mm. I'm really excited to check it out. I have to say, you're great at not making money, because you have the free option and a free trial, which is probably going to be as effective as most people need, and they won't need it after a week.
Yeah, it sucks. But, hopefully the universe will allow us to survive and prosper, because we still have a lot of development to do and a lot of exciting things to add to the app. This is just the beginning of a revolution.
Yeah, you must be excited for the potential here.
Yeah, that's right.
It's been totally great talking to you. I really, really, appreciate your time. Aside from the app, is there anything else you want to point people toward that you would have them check out?
Well, I have a Feeling Good podcast once a week with my co-host Rhonda Borofsky. A lot of people love that. You can find that on my website, which is feelinggood.com, as opposed to feelinggreat.com. And we're publishing the podcasts on video now.
Nice.
On YouTube. And a lot of people like that. And there's a lot of, my website, feelinggood.com, is mainly free resources for people. My books are often very helpful for people. They're not expensive. Even the original, my first book, Feeling Good, was published in 1980. It's still helping tremendous numbers of people. And the new one, Feeling Great, just came out in paperback about a week ago. And there's free classes on my website, a free depression class, a free anxiety class, a free relationship class. There's just a lot of free stuff there, because, ever since my post-medical school days, I've been into free. I think it'd be great for people to get the help you need for free. And that's what I've been trying to make happen.
Yeah. Is there anything else, lastly, that you would like to say just to the people that are listening, especially those that are stuck?
Yeah. The one thing early in my career, I had a mentor for a while, Aaron Beck, and I asked him early in my career, Dr. Beck, all these people are coming to me, they tell me they're hopeless and worthless human beings, and sometimes I get to thinking maybe they're right. And what do you do when you have someone who's really is worthless and hopeless? And he says, David, that's a decision for you to make. He says, I made my decision a long time ago. I've never bought into the idea that any human being is worthless or hopeless. They're just meaningless constructs. And I believe that everyone can be helped. And that assumption has always paid off for me. And I said, well, I'm going to make that same assumption. And it's always paid off for me, too. And so if you're listening, you may think I am a con artist, or, people say, oh, you can do this, you can do that. You're thinking that's a lot of bullshit. And, I know I'm worthless. I know I'm not smart. I know I'm not good. And the fact is, you can change the way you think and feel. And you really owe it to yourself to feel good. And you don't ever buy into the idea that you're hopeless, because it's the world's oldest con. It's the cruelest con, and it's never true. It's never valid. I've had over 40,000 hours working with people with the most severe depression and anxiety you can imagine. And it is possible to break out of these horrible hypnotic, depressive scale kind of states, trances almost like, or an anger trance, or an anxiety, or a panic trance, a shyness trance. It's possible to dramatically change your life. And so don't give up on it, and check out some of the things I'm mentioning, because you can check them out for free. They're not entirely free, though, because they're going to take some effort on your part. That's the one price you're going to have to pay.
Beautiful. David, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. It was one of a great hour and a half for me.